Imagine for a second breaking into a private library. You steal 1 million books, you get caught, and the judge slaps you with a $1.5 billion fine for trespassing and theft.
Which is a pretty bad day in court.
Right, terrible day. But then the judge looks at you and says, however, everything your brain actually learned from reading those stolen books, the vocabulary, the historical facts, the underlying concepts, you are completely free to use all of that to build your own business.
It's such a wild concept.
It really is. And welcome to today's deep dive, where we are looking at a single day of news that honestly completely redefines the boundaries of modern technology.
Yeah, it's a big one.
We are pulling from a July 21st, 2026 report in the Daily Tech Reader, and it focuses entirely on one company, which is Anthropic.
It is just a remarkable convergence of events, honestly. Looking at the sources, we have 4 distinct developments, all colliding on the exact same day.
Yeah, a lot to cover.
Exactly. I mean, we've got a historic copyright settlement, an aggressive medical grant initiative, a brand new national security framework from the White House, and, this is the weird part, some highly mysterious radio silence regarding a critical cybersecurity tool.
It's the silence that always gets you.
Right. But taken together, we are witnessing the exact moment artificial intelligence transitions from being this, wild, unregulated frontier technology into a legally defined pillar of global infrastructure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the absolute bedrock of it all, which is the legal foundation.
Makes sense to start there.
Because anyone following the AI space knows that copyright lawsuits have been this massive dark cloud hanging over the industry since the generative boom of 2023.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that cloud just broke. U.S. District Judge Araceli Martinez-Olguin has approved Anthropic's settlement with authors over the unauthorized use of their books to train the Claude AI.
And the number is just massive.
Staggering. $1.5 billion. This is the largest known copyright settlement in U.S. history, and it's the first major resolution we've seen in these ongoing AI copyright wars.
Yeah, and the scale of that payout is certainly what caught the media's attention, right? Especially since the judge rejected objections from several authors who argue that $1.5 billion was actually too small a penalty.
Which is wild to think about. $1.5 billion is too small.
I know. But what's fascinating here is what happened in the underlying training data case. The true precedent isn't the penalty itself, it's the split ruling that actually led to it.
Right, because earlier in the proceedings, a separate judge ruled that Anthropic illegally downloaded and stored those millions of copyrighted books.
Exactly.
The actual act of hoarding the physical digital files, that was deemed illegal.
But, and this is really the fulcrum on which the entire AI industry rests now, that same judge ruled that the actual training of the AI model on that copyrighted text, that constitutes fair use.
I want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this correctly and that, you listening at home are catching the distinction because it feels like an incredibly fine line to walk.
It is a very fine line.
So is my opening library analogy accurate? Is it essentially a judge saying that digital trespassing is illegal, but the act of a machine learning from the stolen property is perfectly fine?
It is a solid starting point, yeah. But to be perfectly accurate, we have to look at how an AI actually reads. Right?
Okay, how does it read?
Well, when Claude processes 1 million books, it isn't taking a photographic memory of the pages to spit out later. It's mapping the statistical relationships between words.
Ah, nice.
It's learning the grammar, the syntax, the underlying structure of human language. So the court basically separated the acquisition of the data, the digital trespassing, from the cognitive-like process of analyzing it.
So they are paying $1.5 billion for the digital trespassing part, but the statistical map they built, that gets to survive.
Exactly. Which is an unprecedented victory for the industry. I mean, if the courts had ruled that an AI model simply reading and extracting patterns from copyrighted material was infringement, it would have retroactively poisoned every major frontier model in existence.
Wow, they'd all just be gone.
It would have all had to be dismantled. So, by legally protecting the training process itself as fair use, the courts have essentially given the AI industry its permanent legal license to exist.
That's huge.
You might get fined heavily for how you gather your raw materials, sure, but the factory itself is allowed to stay open.
So we have established the legal right for these artificial brains to simply exist. But what happens when you point that, legally cleared, hyper-literate brain at a problem human doctors haven't been able to solve?
That's where things get really impactful.
Right, and that brings us to our second development. Now that this computing power is legally cleared, Anthropic is turning its attention to the medical field.
Yeah, this is great news.
They just announced a focused call for applications under their AI for Science program, specifically targeting rare genetic diseases.
A very underfunded area.
Totally. And they're offering accepted researchers up to $50,000 in Claude credits over a 6-month period, with an application deadline of August 2nd.
The structure of this initiative is highly strategic, too. They have divided the grants into 2 distinct tracks.
Okay, what are they?
So the first track is dedicated to clinical researchers and patient organizations. These are the groups doing the fundamental legwork to understand disease mechanisms, like figuring out how a specific genetic anomaly actually operates in the human body.
Makes sense.
And the second
track targets early-stage biotech companies to actually accelerate the physical drug development.
And to make this happen, Anthropic is giving these grantees API access to Claude Opus, building on that Claude Science AI workbench that just launched back on June 30th.
Right, the new workbench. And just for anyone who isn't living in developer documentation every day, API stands for Application Programming Interface. In plain English, it just means these researchers aren't typing questions into a web browser, like a standard user.
Yeah, it's way deeper than that.
They get a direct pipeline to plug their own secure lab computers and their massive medical databases directly into Claude's neural network.
And the early name partners give us a really clear view of how that pipeline is being used.
Oh, definitely.
Anthropic is working with the Monarch Initiative, which is an international consortium that focuses on diagnosing rare diseases. And they're also partnering with a group called Every Cure.
Right, I saw that.
And what Every Cure does is truly remarkable. They're using Claude to comb through millions of chemical candidates to identify opportunities for drug repurposing.
Meaning they're looking at drugs that are already proven safe, already on the market, and trying to see if they, accidentally cure something else.
That is exactly the goal. And the necessity of AI in this space really just comes down to grim economics.
Yeah, the money side of things.
Right. Neglected diseases are conditions that pharmaceutical companies typically just ignore. The traditional model of drug development relies on finding blockbuster treatments that millions of people will buy.
Because the research costs are just so astronomically high.
Exactly. If a genetic disease only affects, say, 5,000 people globally, a major pharmaceutical company simply cannot justify spending a decade and $1 billion developing a cure. The math just doesn't work.
Okay, well, I am glad you brought up the astronomical costs, because I have to push back a little on the scale of this new Anthropic program.
Go ahead.
Bringing a single new drug to market famously costs billions of dollars. Does offering up to $50,000 in Claude credits actually move the needle for these researchers? Or is this essentially a microscopic drop in the bucket just designed to generate good PR?
That's a fair question, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, the impact of those credits becomes much clearer.
Okay, how so?
You are entirely correct that the later stages of drug development, the human clinical trials, the massive FDA approval process, those cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But AI isn't paying for the clinical trials.
Right, it can't run a trial.
Exactly. It is revolutionizing the preclinical stage. $50,000 in cloud compute power, which is essentially just renting time on Anthropic's supercomputers, that dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for analyzing impossibly large data sets.
I see. So it's not paying for the final journey, it's paying to generate the map that gets them there years faster.
Yes. Think about the pattern recognition we just discussed in the copyright case. Instead of analyzing English grammar, Claude is analyzing the grammar of biology.
That's a great way to put it.
A small team of researchers can use those credits to simulate protein folding or cross-reference the chemical structure of every known safe drug against the cellular mechanism of a rare disease.
Which would take humans forever.
Finding the one compound that fits a specific genetic anomaly is like finding a needle in a haystack of 1 billion needles. For human researchers, that takes a lifetime. For an AI, it takes hours.
Wow.
So those credits grant a tiny biotech startup the analytical muscle of a massive, Multinational Pharmaceutical Research Division.
Now, the ability to look at millions of lines of biological data and spot the one hidden anomaly that cures a disease is an incredible capability.
It truly is.
But if you take that exact same pattern recognition engine and point it at a country's defense network instead of human DNA, suddenly that miracle looks like a severe national security threat.
Oh, a massive threat.
Which is exactly why Washington is stepping into the fray now.
The dual-use nature of these models is honestly the defining tension of our era. The pattern recognition that cures is the exact same pattern recognition that destroys.
Which brings us to the White House. According to the Daily Tech Reader report, we are nearing the announcement of a voluntary frontier model framework.
And the timing on this is tight.
Very tight. This framework is expected to drop before August 1st. And that date isn't random. It's driven by a strict 60-day deadline stemming from President Trump's June 2nd executive order regarding AI and cybersecurity.
Right, and just to be clear, strictly speaking on a factual level, that EO is just the catalyst setting this whole 60-day deadline in motion.
Exactly, just the procedural trigger. So, under this impending reality, federal agencies will be granted a 30-day pre-release review window to assess the national security implications of any new frontier model before the public is allowed to use it.
And the roster of tech giants participating in the finalization of this framework is actually quite telling.
Who's in?
Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google are all at the table. Meta, however, is notably absent from the agreement.
So what does this all mean? The government is calling it a framework, but the text specifically prohibits mandatory licensing or pre-clearance.
Right, it's not a hard law.
It feels like this language was very carefully negotiated to reassure the tech industry that Washington isn't trying to build this slow, bureaucratic approval regime that will just kill American innovation.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
It feels more like a high-stakes gentleman's agreement than a rigid legal statute.
It really is a precarious balancing act. I mean, the federal government desperately wants visibility into technologies that could theoretically be used to, say, design bioweapons or launch automated cyber attacks.
Naturally.
However, what makes this gentleman's agreement particularly compelling is Anthropic's rocky history with the defense establishment.
Yeah, that relationship has not been seamless.
Not at all. Just earlier in 2026, Anthropic had a $200 million Pentagon contract terminated.
Which is insane. I mean, walking away from a $200 million government contract is practically unheard of in the tech sector.
They didn't just walk away, they drew a very hard ethical line. Anthropic refused to accept contract language that would have permitted the use of their AI for autonomous weapons systems without human intervention.
Wow, so they wouldn't let the AI pull the trigger, basically.
Exactly. And the fallout from that refusal was severe. It led to the administration temporarily designating Anthropic as a supply chain risk.
That is a staggering penalty.
It's huge.
To go from being labeled a literal supply chain risk by the federal government just months ago to now sitting at the table with the White House, Google, and OpenAI to draft the national security rulebook for the entire country.
Yeah, it's a crazy turnaround. But both sides clearly realized that a prolonged standoff was mutually destructive.
Right. They need each other.
Anthropic needs government contracts and regulatory certainty to survive against competitors like OpenAI, and the government simply cannot afford to be blind to what one of the world's leading AI labs is building.
And this framework isn't just theoretical bureaucracy happening in a vacuum somewhere.
No, not at all.
The concept of a 30-day federal review period has an immediate direct impact on Anthropic's most sensitive project, which is operating out in the wild as we speak.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the final and perhaps most mysterious development from the July 21st report, Project Glasswing and the Claude Mythos 5 model.
This is the exact point where all the disparate threads of today's deep dive, the legal precedents, the raw computational power, and the national security negotiations, they all weave together into a single, highly sensitive reality.
Absolutely. So to give you some context on Project Glasswing, this is an initiative involving roughly 200 vetted partner organizations spread across 15 different countries.
A very select group.
Very select. Their mission is to scan critical infrastructure code bases using a highly restricted, specialized AI model called Claude Mythos 5.
And when we say critical infrastructure, we really aren't talking about the code that runs a social media feed.
Oh, no. We are talking about the software that keeps your local tap water clean, the systems that prevent your banking app from being drained, and the networks running regional power grids.
These critical infrastructure code bases are the absolute holy grail for state-sponsored hackers.
Exactly. So Project Glasswing is using Mythos 5 to find the vulnerabilities in our societal foundation before malicious actors do.
But there is a glaring anomaly right now. Project Glasswing's 90-day progress report is pending, and as of this July 21st report, it remains entirely unpublished.
Just total radio silence.
Anthropic has maintained complete silence. Furthermore, access to the Mythos 5 model itself remains strictly locked down to those original 200 vetted partners.
And that restriction has been in place since its restoration on July 1st, right?
Correct. And there is no confirmed timeline for when or if developers and the general public will ever get access to it.
The silence from a company that usually publishes extensive research papers on their findings is deafening, especially given the stakes of what Glasswing is analyzing.
It is very uncharacteristic.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's look at the calendar.
Right.
Black Hat USA, which is arguably the most important high-profile cybersecurity conference in the world, is opening in Las Vegas in exactly 15 days on August 5th.
Which is very soon.
So you have to wonder about the underlying strategy here. Are they deliberately holding back this 90-day Glasswing report to make a theatrical, industry-shaking splash at Black Hat?
A PR stunt, basically.
Right. Or is the impending White House framework we just discussed actively forcing them to hit the brakes?
This raises an important question about how the mechanics of the new White House framework operate behind closed doors.
How so?
Well, the evaluation benchmarks that the government uses to classify these models are not public information.
Oh, of course not.
They are highly classified, and they are run by the National Security Agency, the NSA. Now, consider what Mythos 5 actually does. It is explicitly designed to analyze complex infrastructure for zero-day exploits.
And for anyone unfamiliar with the term, a zero-day exploit is a flaw in software that the good guys don't know about yet, meaning they have 0 days to fix it before hackers can use it to break in.
Exactly that. And because Mythos 5 is so remarkably powerful at finding those structural weaknesses in code, it is an obvious, clear-cut candidate for designation as a covered frontier model under the new White House framework.
Meaning it gets caught in the new regulatory net.
It falls right into it. Any future decision by Anthropic to expand access to Mythos 5 beyond that initial cohort of 200 Glasswing partners would presumably trigger that brand new 30-day pre-release government review window.
Wow, so they can't just release it.
Right. Anthropic can't just flip a switch and release the API to the broader developer community anymore. Under the new agreement, the NSA and federal intelligence agencies get a month to look under the hood.
They get to decide if releasing a tool that can find zero-day exploits in a power grid constitutes an active national security threat?
Exactly. So you're saying the delay in the 90-day report might have absolutely nothing to do with a PR strategy for the Black Hat conference.
It might just be the stark reality of newly implemented federal oversight taking effect in real time, locking the model down while the government runs its diagnostics.
It is highly probable, honestly. The technology has just matured to a point where releasing it without government clearance is no longer an option.
It is truly staggering to step back and look at the sheer scope of what we've covered today.
It's a lot to take in.
Synthesizing all of this in a single day of news reporting from the Daily Tech Reader, we have watched AI validate its very legal existence and secure its future by surviving a $1.5 billion copyright judgment over its training data.
And we saw that legally cleared intelligence immediately pivot to offer a lifeline to rare disease patients, utilizing pattern recognition to circumvent the broken economics of traditional drug discovery.
While simultaneously negotiating complex, high-stakes national security boundaries with the White House, coming back from being labeled a supply chain risk to drafting the rules of engagement.
Which is incredible.
And all the while, it is quietly scanning and protecting the globe's critical infrastructure through a restricted model that might just be too powerful to ever release to the public.
We are looking at a portrait of a technology that is touching every single pillar of human civilization simultaneously.
Yeah, that's really what it is.
It is a profound structural shift in how our society operates. And I think it leaves us with a fascinating paradox to consider.
Okay, what's that?
Well, if the courts have decided, as we saw in the very first segment, that an AI training on millions of texts is legally just fair use reading, essentially treating the software like a very fast, very well-read student in a library.
Right.
But at the exact same time, the White House and the NSA decide the resulting model is so powerful that it requires classified national security reviews before the public could even touch it. At what point does a commercial piece of software legally cross the line from a well-read student into a piece of classified government weaponry?
Wow, that is the exact question we are going to be watching play out over the next few
It
years.
really is.
It is a thin line, and it seems to be shifting beneath our feet every single day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the rapidly changing world around you. Keep looking for those hidden connections, and we will catch you next time as we continue to explore the absolute bleeding edge of technology.